My sister texted me, let mom and dad move in with you. They sold their house to settle my debt. Then she claimed it was just family helps family. So I replied funny, that always means me helping you. The text came through at 8:47 p.m. on Friday. I was finishing dinner, my phone face down on the kitchen counter because I'd been trying to have one meal without checking messages every 5 minutes. When I finally looked, there was 3 texts from my mother. Your father and I need to talk to you about something important. We had to make a difficult decision. I sold the house to pay off Madison's debts. We're moving in with you tomorrow. We'll be there by noon. I read the messages 3 times, my brain refusing to process the words in any order that made sense. They'd sold their house to pay my sister's debts, and they were moving into my house tomorrow without asking. Not, can we stay with you for a while? Not, would you be willing to help us during this difficult time? Just a flat statement of fact, delivered via text message with less notice than you'd give someone about a lunch date. I looked around my small 2-bedroom house, the one I'd bought 18 months ago, after years of saving, budgeting, and sacrifice. The first place that had ever been truly mine, the sanctuary I'd created specifically to have space away from my chaotic family and their constant demands. They expected to move in tomorrow. My fingers moved before my brain fully caught up typing out a response that felt like it was coming from someone else. I just sold mine too. I hit send, then immediately opened my laptop and started searching for flights. Found a red-eye to Portland, Oregon, leaving at 11:30 p.m. Booked it. One-way ticket, no return date. Then I started packing. The logical part of my brain was screaming that this was insane, that I couldn't just abandon my house and my job and my entire life because of a text message. But a deeper, more primal part of me knew this was the only way. If my parents showed up tomorrow and found me here, I'd never get free. They'd guilt me into letting them stay temporarily, which would become permanent. Madison would follow shortly after, along with her creditors and her chaos. My house would become their house, and I'd be trapped in the same family dysfunction I'd spent my adult life trying to escape. So I packed. 2 suitcases of clothes, my laptop, and important documents, the photo albums that actually mattered to me. Everything else could stay or be dealt with later. I'd figure it out once I had distance and clarity. My phone rang at 9:02 p.m. Madison. I let it go to voicemail, but she called back immediately. Then again on the 4th call I answered. What the hell do you mean you sold your house? Madison's voice was so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. Exactly what I said. I sold it. You're lying. You can't sell a house that fast. You're just being dramatic because you're mad about mom and dad moving in with you. I'm not being dramatic. I sold it 3 weeks ago. Closed yesterday. The buyers take possession on Friday. This was a lie. I hadn't sold the house, but Madison didn't need to know that. What she needed to know was that her plan, and I had no doubt this whole thing was her plan. Not my parents had failed. 3 weeks ago. Why would you sell your house 3 weeks ago? Because I'm moving to Oregon. I got a job offer. Better pay, better opportunities. I've been planning this for months. Another lie, but it was rolling off my tongue easily now. Sometimes the best defense against family chaos is a wall of fiction they can't penetrate. You never said anything about moving to Oregon? Why would I? We barely talk, Madison. I don't owe you updates about my life plans. But where are mom and dad supposed to go? They sold their house because of your promise to take them in. I never promised them anything. They sent me a text at 8:47 tonight, informing me they were moving in tomorrow. That's not asking, that's demanding. And I don't respond well to demands. This is so selfish. They're your parents. They need help. They need help because they keep bailing you out of your self-created disasters. How much did they pay this time? Madison, $50,100. Silence. Then quieter. $75,000. What was it this time? Credit cards. A failed business venture. Gambling debts. It's complicated. It's always complicated with you, and it always ends with mom and dad sacrificing everything to fix your mistakes while I'm expected to pick up the pieces. Not this time. Where are they supposed to live, Ashley? They're selling their house. They have nowhere to go. They'll figure it out. They're adults. Maybe they can move in with you since you're the one who created this situation. I don't have room. I'm in a 1-bedroom apartment. Then I guess you'll have to get creative because I'm boarding a plane to Portland in 2 hours and I won't be back. I hung up before she could respond, blocked her number, then blocked my parents' numbers too. If they wanted to reach me, they'd have to email, and I could ignore those at my leisure. Billy's input. That reaction was extreme, but also kind of understandable. You jumping straight to leaving. Do you think you acted out of clarity or panic? Feels like both. You knew the pattern, but the speed says you've been holding this in for a long time. Your parents just announcing they're moving in is wild. Why didn't they ask first? My take. They've probably always assumed you'd say yes, so they skipped the step entirely. Madison blaming you instantly is telling. Do you think she actually expected you to fix everything again, or was she just panicking? Sounds like she's used to being rescued, so she assumed you'd be next in line. Lying about selling the house. Smart short-term, but risky. The next few hours were a blur of activity. I called my best friend Natalie, the only person I trusted with the truth about what was happening. You're doing what Natalie's voice was incredulous, but not judgmental. She'd known my family long enough to understand. I'm leaving. Tonight. One-way ticket to Portland. I just need someone to know where I am in case something happens. Ashley, are you sure about this? I mean, I support you, but this is huge. Your job, your house, everything. My job has been soul-crushing for 2 years. I've been applying to remote positions for months. I can work from anywhere. The house I looked around the living room, I'd painted myself the furniture I'd chosen carefully. The house I can rent out or sell for real later. Right now, I just need to not be here when they show up tomorrow expecting to move in. What do you need from me? Can you check on the house in a few days? Make sure they didn't break in or something crazy. I'll pay you. You're not paying me? I'll check on it. And Ashley, I think you're doing the right thing. Your family has been sucking you dry for years. Maybe this is what it takes to finally break free. I gave Natalie my spare key and the alarm code, along with permission to deal with anything that came up. Then I finished packing, loaded my car, and drove to the airport. The red-eye flight was half empty. I got a window seat and watched the city lights disappear below me, feeling simultaneously terrified and liberated. I'd just blown up my entire life based on a text message and a series of impulsive decisions. But I'd also just escaped a trap that would have destroyed what was left of my independence and financial stability. My phone. I turned it back on briefly before takeoff to let Natalie know I'd made it to the airport. Showed 23 missed calls, 15 from Madison, 8 from my mother. A string of text messages that I didn't read beyond the preview lines visible on the lock screen. How could you do this to us? Your father is devastated. We raised you better than this. You're being incredibly selfish. I turned the phone off completely and shoved it in my bag. They could be devastated and think I was selfish all they wanted. I was done setting myself on fire to keep them warm. Portland was gray and drizzling when I landed at 6:30 a.m. I'd never been to Oregon before, had no connections here, no job lined up, no apartment waiting. Just 2 suitcases and a desperate need to be anywhere that wasn't within driving distance of my family. I got a rideshare to a hotel near downtown, checked in and crashed for 6 hours. When I woke up, I ordered room service and finally let myself think about what I'd done. The panic attack hit around 3 p.m. Sitting on the hotel bed, eating overpriced pasta and suddenly unable to breathe as the magnitude of my choices crashed over me. I'd abandoned my house. My job would fire me for no call, no show when I didn't appear tomorrow. My family probably thought I'd had a breakdown. Maybe I had. But underneath the panic was something else, a lighter feeling like a weight lifting. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't budgeting for the emergency loan Madison would need or the favor my parents would demand. Wasn't performing the role of responsible daughter while watching my sister drain our parents dry and face no consequences. I was free, terrifyingly, completely free. Over the next week, I rebuilding from scratch. Found a furnished month-to-month apartment in a quiet neighborhood, applied for remote work positions and got 3 interviews within days, started exploring Portland, discovering coffee shops and bookstores and trails through forests that made my Midwest hometown seem colorless in comparison. Natalie sent updates via email which I'd unblocked for her specifically. Your parents showed up at your house at 11 a.m., like they said. Tried the door, found it locked. Rang the doorbell for 20 minutes. Your mom called me. I guess they got my number from your emergency contacts asking if I knew where you were. I told them you'd moved to Oregon for a job. Your dad called me a liar. They left around 1 p.m. Madison came by your house today, tried to get me to give her the key so she could check on things. I told her no. She threatened to call the police and report a break-in or something. I told her to go ahead that I had written permission from the homeowner. She left in a huff. Your mom called me again. She was crying saying they don't know what to do, that the closing on their house is in 2 weeks and they have nowhere to go. She asked if you'd left any information about where in Oregon you are. I said no. She asked if I had a way to contact you. I said no. I'm a terrible liar, Ashley, so she probably knows I'm lying, but I didn't break. I sent Natalie a generous Venmo payment with a note for dealing with my chaos. You're the best friend could ask for. She sent it back with a message. I don't want your money. I want you to be happy and free. Stay in Oregon. Build a new life. Don't come back. 2 weeks after I'd left, I got my first remote job offer. Technical writing position, fully remote, better pay than my previous job. I accepted immediately. Billy's input. This feels like a breaking point that had been building for years. You leaving overnight? Do you think this was the only way to finally break the cycle, or just the fastest way? Honestly, it feels extreme, but also like you knew a simple no wouldn't stick. Your parents showing up anyway proves something. Why didn't they question it or confirm? First, to me that says they were used to overriding your boundaries completely. Madison's reaction is predictable. Do you think she ever saw you as a person or just as backup support? Feels like you were part of her safety net, not her family. The lie about selling the house worked short term, but my parents eventually figured out how to email me. The messages started arriving about 3 weeks after I'd left. From Mom. Ashley, please tell us where you are. We're staying with your Aunt Linda temporarily, but it's not a permanent solution. We need to know you're safe. We need to understand why you abandoned us like this. I didn't respond. From Dad. Your mother is beside herself with worry. Whatever you're angry about, we can work through it. But disappearing without a word is cruel and immature. You owe us at least an explanation. I didn't respond. From Madison. I know you think you're punishing Mom and Dad, but you're really just proving what a selfish person you've always been. They gave up everything for you, and this is how you repay them. By running away when they need you. You're pathetic. That one I responded to. Just 3 words. Projection is ugly. She didn't email back. After a month of silence, my mother sent a longer email, apologetic in tone, trying to explain their side. Ashley, I understand now that we should have asked instead of telling you we were moving in. It was presumptuous and unfair, but you have to understand the position we were in. Madison's creditors were threatening legal action. If we didn't pay her debts, she could have gone to jail. What were we supposed to do? Let our daughter go to prison. The email went on to detail Madison's various financial disasters. Credit card debt from a shopping addiction, a failed MLM scheme she'd invested heavily in personal loans from sketchy lenders who were now demanding payment with interest. The total was actually closer to $90,000, not the $75,000 Madison had admitted to. We sold the house because it was our only asset of value. We thought you, as our other daughter, would understand family obligation and help us in our time of need. We never imagined you'd run away instead of stepping up. I saved the email to a folder labeled Family Archive and didn't respond. They'd made their choice to prioritize Madison's self-created disasters over their own financial stability. That was their decision to live with, not mine to fix. 3 months into my Portland life, I finally dealt with the house situation, contacted a property management company, had them inspect and photograph everything and put it up for rent. It was occupied within 2 weeks by a nice couple in their 30s who took excellent care of it. The rental income covered my mortgage and provided a small cushion. I could have sold it and cut ties completely, but keeping it felt like maintaining a tiny lifeline to my old life, just in case this new one didn't work out. But the new life was working out better than I'd imagined. I'd made friends through a hiking group, started dating someone I'd met at a coffee shop, and was genuinely happy in ways I hadn't been in years. Portland suited me. The rain, the green, the culture of people who'd also come here to reinvent themselves. Madison found my address somehow. Probably hired a PI or convinced someone to look up property records. A letter arrived 6 months after I'd left, forwarded from my rental house by the property management company. The letter was 8 pages long, handwritten furious. Madison laid out all my sins. Abandoning the family, forcing our parents into poverty, ruining her chances at rebuilding her life, being selfish and cold and uncaring. She blamed me for Mom's depression, Dad's health problems, and her own continued financial struggles. You could have helped, she wrote. You could have taken them in for just a few months while they got back on their feet, but instead you ran away like a coward. You've always thought you were better than me, better than them, and now you've proven it. You care more about your precious independence than about family. I hope you're happy in Oregon while the rest of us suffer because of your choices. I read the letter once, then burned it in my kitchen sink, watched the pages curl and blacken and turn to ash. Let the smoke carry away her accusations and her anger. She was right about one thing. I did care more about my independence than about enabling the family dysfunction that had defined my first 30 years. And I was happy, genuinely, surprisingly happy. A year after I'd left, I got a call from an unknown number. I'd unblocked my family months earlier, figuring enough time had passed that the harassment would have stopped. The number wasn't one I recognized, but it had my hometown area code. I answered. "Hello. Ashley, it's Aunt Linda, my mother's sister, the one they'd been staying with temporarily." "Hi, Aunt Linda. Is everything okay? I wanted to let you know that your parents are doing better. They've found an apartment they can afford on their combined Social Security and your dad's pension. They're moving out of my place next month." "That's good. I'm glad they landed on their feet." "Are you—" Linda's tone was sharp. "Because you left them homeless and didn't seem to care. They left themselves homeless when they sold their house to pay Madison's debts. I didn't make that choice. They did. They needed help. They needed to stop enabling Madison. There's a difference." Silence. Then Linda sighed. "You're probably right. I've watched her manipulate them for years. This was just the biggest example. But Ashley, they're your parents. Don't you think you owe them something? I owe them the childhood they gave me, which was good mostly. I don't owe them my adult life, my financial stability, or my mental health. They made choices. I made mine. We're all living with the consequences. That's a very cold way to look at family, maybe? Or maybe it's the only way to survive a family that sees you as an emergency fund instead of a person." Linda didn't have a response to that. We talked for a few more minutes about neutral topics, then hung up. I felt unsettled for a few hours afterward, but not guilty. Guilt would have meant believing I'd done something wrong, and I hadn't. I'd protected myself. That was never wrong, regardless of what my family thought. 2 weeks after I'd left, I got my first remote job offer. Technical writing position, fully remote, better pay than my previous job. I accepted immediately. The HR manager who called with the offer asked casually about my current employment status. "I see there's a gap in your resume from your last position. Are you still employed there?" "No, I left 2 weeks ago. Family emergency required me to relocate immediately. I hope everything's okay now. It's getting better every day," I said, which was true, in ways she couldn't imagine. The job started the following Monday. I set up a home office in my apartment's second bedroom, bought a decent desk and ergonomic chair, and threw myself into work with an intensity that surprised me. Being productive, being valued for my skills, receiving a paycheck that was mine alone, and not earmarked for family emergencies. It felt revolutionary. My old job called a week after I'd disappeared. The HR director, sounding annoyed and confused, left a voicemail asking where I'd been and whether I intended to return or if I was resigning. I called back during their lunch hour hoping to get voicemail. Got the HR director instead. "Ashley, where have you been? You've missed a week of work without calling in. I apologize for the lack of notice. I had a family emergency that required immediate relocation. I'm calling to formally resign effective immediately." Effective immediately. You can't just abandon your position. I understand this is inconvenient. I'm happy to help transition my projects remotely if needed, but I won't be returning to the office. There was a long pause. "Are you okay? This is very unlike you." The concern in her voice almost broke through my careful calm. Sarah had been a good supervisor, had advocated for my raises and promotions. She didn't deserve to be left hanging. "I'm okay. Better than I've been in a long time, actually. I just needed a fresh start, and sometimes that means burning bridges quickly before you can talk yourself out of it. Well, I'm sorry to lose you. You were one of our best. If you ever want to come back, I won't, but I appreciate the offer." After I hung up, I cried for 20 minutes. Not because I regretted leaving, but because it was the last thread connecting me to my old life, and now it was severed completely. There was no going back now, even if I wanted to. But I didn't want to. That was the surprising part. I missed certain things. My favorite coffee shop, the walking trail near my old house, the familiarity of a life I'd built over years. But I didn't miss the constant anxiety about when the next family crisis would hit, who would need money, what emergency would require me to drop everything. My first paycheck from the new job hit my bank account, and I sat staring at the deposit notification for a full minute. Money that was completely, entirely mine. No one knew how much I made now. No one could calculate what I could afford to give them. No one could guilt me about having savings while they struggled. I opened a new bank account at a local credit union, transferred everything from my old accounts, and closed them. If my family somehow got access to my old account information, they'd find nothing. Another thread cut. Natalie emailed me updates that painted an increasingly chaotic picture back home. "Your parents closed on their house sale yesterday. They've moved most of their stuff into storage and are living with Linda. Your dad looks about 10 years older, Ashley. Your mom cried through the entire moving process. Madison showed up to help, but really just took a bunch of furniture for her apartment, claiming she deserved it since she's the one who's struggling. Linda called me again. She's at her wit's end with your parents staying there. Apparently your dad keeps making comments about what a disappointment you turned out to be, how they raised you better than this, how family should come first. Linda finally snapped and told him that maybe if he'd put his foot down with Madison years ago instead of enabling her, none of this would have happened. He hasn't spoken to her in 3 days. They're living in her house in hostile silence. Big news, Madison got evicted from her apartment. Surprise, surprise, she didn't pay rent for 3 months. She asked your parents to pay it and they said no. They don't have any money left. She threw a massive fit and accused them of choosing you over her. Your mom pointed out that you aren't even here, and Madison said that's exactly the point. You abandoned them so they should have money to help her instead. The logic doesn't track. But when has Madison ever been logical? Madison is now staying with her on-again, off-again boyfriend Trevor. You remember him? The guy who's been mooching off her for years. Apparently he told her she could stay only if she paid half the rent. She doesn't have half the rent, so she's doing some kind of under-the-table work and coming up short every month. The irony of her being in the same position she put your parents in seems completely lost on her. I read these updates with a strange detachment. These were characters in a story I used to be part of, not people whose problems required my intervention. It was like watching a TV show I'd once been invested in, but had now moved past. My Portland life continued to develop. I joined a book club at a local independent bookstore and met people who knew nothing about my family history. When they asked about my background, I gave them the edited version. Grew up in the Midwest, worked in corporate for a while, decided I needed a change and moved out here for a fresh start. No one pressed for details. Portland was full of people who'd come here for fresh starts. My story wasn't unusual. I met Devin at a hiking group meetup 3 months after arriving. He was a software engineer who'd moved to Portland from California 2 years earlier, also escaping family drama he didn't elaborate on. We bonded over being refugees from our respective pasts and our shared love of rainy day bookstore browsing. Our third date, he asked about my family. Do your parents visit you siblings? No, we're not in contact. It's complicated. Family usually is. My parents haven't spoken to me in 18 months because I refused to loan my brother money for his 6th failed business venture. How did you get past the guilt therapy mostly and realizing that I'm not responsible for fixing problems I didn't create? My brother is 40 years old. If he can't figure out how to sustain a business after 6 attempts, maybe he should get a regular job, instead of expecting the family bank to keep funding his entrepreneurial fantasies. What did your parents say when you said no, that I was selfish, that family helps family, that I'd regret choosing money over relationships? The usual guilt trip playbook. And do you regret it? Devin was quiet for a moment, considering the question seriously. Sometimes I regret the loss of the relationship I wish we could have had, but I don't regret protecting myself from the relationship we actually had. There's a difference. That conversation shifted something in me. I'd been carrying low-level guilt about my parents feeling like maybe I'd overreacted. Maybe I should have at least talked to them before disappearing. But Devin's framework helped. I didn't regret protecting myself from the relationship we actually had. My parents wanted a daughter who would sacrifice her stability to fix their mistakes. I wanted parents who wouldn't put me in that position. We wanted incompatible things, and my leaving was the only way to resolve that incompatibility. For months after fleeing, I finally responded to one of my mother's emails. Not because I felt obligated, but because I was finally stable enough to engage without being pulled back into their orbit. Mom, I'm safe and doing well. I understand you're disappointed in my choices, but they were necessary for my well-being. I'm not coming back, and I'm not providing financial support. I hope you and Dad find stable housing and figure out a sustainable path forward. I'm not the solution to your problems, and I never should have been expected to be. Take care of yourselves. Ashley. Her response came within an hour. A long email full of hurt and accusations and pleas for me to reconsider. I read it once, then archived it without responding. I'd said what needed to be said. Further engagement would just restart the cycle. Madison tried a different approach. She created a fake email address and pretended to be a mutual friend from high school, asking if I wanted to reconnect. The writing style gave her away immediately. Madison had never been able to disguise her particular brand of aggressive neediness. I responded, Madison, I know this is you. Stop trying to manipulate your way back into my life. I'm not giving you money, information, or access. Move on. She didn't email back, but she did post a long Facebook rant about ungrateful siblings who abandoned their families in their time of need. Several mutual acquaintances commented with support for her not knowing the full story. I didn't engage or correct the narrative. Let them believe whatever Madison told them. Their opinions didn't affect my life anymore. My lease was up 6 months after I'd arrived in Portland. Instead of renewing, I started looking at houses to buy, used the equity from my rental property back home. It had appreciated nicely and the tenants were paying down my mortgage to make a down payment on a small craftsman bungalow in a quiet neighborhood. The day I closed on the house, I sat on the front porch steps and cried. Happy tears this time. This house was mine in a way my previous one never had been. That house always felt like it could be invaded, like family could show up and claim space. This house was in a city where they didn't know my address, in a state they'd never visited, behind boundaries I'd finally learned to enforce. Natalie flew out to help me move in, bringing housewarming gifts and moral support. We spent a weekend painting walls, hanging curtains, and assembling furniture from IKEA while drinking wine and laughing. You seem different, Natalie observed while we were building a bookshelf. Lighter, like you're not carrying the weight of the world anymore. I'm not carrying their weight anymore. Turns out that was most of it. Do you miss them? Your parents, I mean. Not Madison. I miss the parents I thought I had when I was younger. The ones I believed would protect me and support me unconditionally. But those parents never existed. They always had conditions. And the main condition was that I prioritize Madison's needs over my own. I don't miss the parents I actually had. That's incredibly sad and incredibly healthy at the same time. Recovery is weird like that. My first Portland Christmas, I was invited to Devin's family gathering. His parents were hosting despite the estrangement with his brother, and Devin wanted me there for moral support. You don't have to come if it's too much, he said. I know family stuff is complicated for you. Will your brother be there? No, he's banned after he tried to steal my mom's jewelry to pawn for business capital last year. Then I'll come. I'd like to meet your family. The gathering was small and surprisingly functional. Devin's parents were warm and welcoming, his sister was funny and kind, and no one asked invasive questions about my background or family. At one point, Devin's mother mentioned that they were glad I was there, that Devin seemed happier than he'd been in years. He's not carrying as much stress, she said. I think you're good for him. I think we're good for each other. We understand each other's boundaries. She smiled knowingly. Boundaries are important. I wish we taught our son about them earlier. Maybe things would have turned out differently. You can't control how your kids turn out, I said. You can only control how you respond to their choices. That's very wise, and very difficult to actually practice. I'm learning that with my own family. After dinner, Devin and I walked through his parents' neighborhood looking at Christmas lights. Thank you for coming tonight, he said. I know it was probably weird being around a family gathering after everything with yours. It was actually nice. Your family seems to actually like each other, most of the time. We have our dysfunction, just different flavor than yours. Everyone's family is dysfunctional in their own way. The question is whether it's manageable dysfunction or the kind that consumes you. And yours was the consuming kind. Yeah, but I got out before it consumed me completely. We walked in comfortable silence for a while, then Devin said, I'm glad you ended up in Portland. Glad you got on that plane and started over. Me too. Best impulsive decision I've ever made. Billy's input. That last part really shows the difference between escaping and actually building something new. You didn't just run, you rebuilt. Your parents expecting to move in without asking. Did they ever actually see you as independent or just backup support? Feels like they never updated how they viewed you as an adult. Your choice to leave instantly. Was it courage or avoidance? Honestly, I think it was both. But in your case, avoidance might have been the only way to enforce a boundary. Madison blaming you for everything. Do you think she genuinely believes it or just needs a scapegoat? My take. She knows on some level, but blaming you is easier than accountability. 2 years after the text message that changed everything, I was living a life I'd never imagined possible. The remote job had led to a promotion. I'd bought a small house in Portland, actually bought it with a mortgage in my name, only in a city where my family couldn't casually drop by. I was in a serious relationship with someone who respected my boundaries and didn't think family obligation meant accepting abuse. Madison still sent occasional emails trying to restart contact, usually around holidays or when she needed money. I never responded. My parents sent birthday cards to my rental house. They still didn't know my Portland address with generic messages and no mention of the rift. I didn't respond to those either. Natalie came to visit me, flying out for a long weekend to see my new life. We hiked through the Columbia River Gorge, drank too much wine at a vineyard, and stayed up late talking about everything that had happened. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Just leaving everything behind like that." "Sometimes I regret how I did it. The lying about selling the house, the dramatic midnight flight. But leaving itself, never. That text message was the wake-up call I needed. If I'd stayed, if I'd let them move in, I'd still be there. Still drowning in their problems. Still believing that being a good daughter meant sacrificing myself for people who would never do the same for me. What do you think would have happened if you'd stayed?" I thought about it. They would have moved in temporarily. Madison would have followed within a month because she'd have gotten evicted or needed a place to stay for just a few weeks. I would have been supporting all three of them while they made no effort to change anything. My savings would have evaporated. My mental health would have tanked. Eventually, I would have lost the house anyway because I couldn't afford to support 4 adults on one salary. So you saved yourself. I saved myself. And they're all fine. Mom and Dad have an apartment. Madison's still creating chaos and finding people to bail her out. The world didn't end because I refused to be the family sacrifice. Natalie raised her wine glass. To saving yourself. To one-way flights and new beginnings. I clinked my glass against hers. To freedom. My parents texted me at 8:47 p.m. on a Tuesday that they'd sold their house for my sister's debts and were moving in with me tomorrow. I replied that I'd sold mine too and booked a one-way flight to the coast. 15 minutes later, my sister called screaming and I told her the truth she didn't want to hear. Their crisis wasn't my emergency. Their choices weren't my responsibility. Their guilt wasn't my burden. Then I hung up, got on that plane, and built a life where I got to be a person instead of a solution to other people's problems. 2 years later, I don't regret a single moment of it. Not the impulsive flight, not the burned bridges, not the family members who think I'm cold and selfish. Because I'm happy. Actually genuinely happy. And that's worth more than any family obligation could ever be. They wanted me to save them from consequences they'd created. Instead, I saved myself from the wreckage of their choices. Best decision I ever made.